Okay, call back everybody's attention again. And we're gonna reverse now. And we're gonna start Jonathan up there. And it won't be exactly reverse because I don't remember the total order.
Definitely. We talked in a lot of different directions, so my group can also kick in. But we talked about how shooting for meadow good condition B soils, RC number 58, in ways that'll, by shooting for that, even if your reviewers are missing a few things, by shooting for the best, you're probably going to come out significantly better than we are now. But that being said, obviously we got Des Moines here. That has significant impacts on redevelopment, and simply the impacts that we have. What are you going to try and reach for with redevelopment is a major consideration. And this is also one that was kind of brought up. It's probably only going to get passed if everyone agrees on it. That would be everyone metro-wide.
Check for your
Okay. Well, we talked about how it's, we need to do this. It's pretty easy to identify how much we've spent fixing problems from the past and even, being able to help downstream because the burden ends up in the development community either way. So, doing it right up first is going to be a lot easier than fixing it after the fact. And this is, still a good time to move forward as a group to make it happen. So that's kind of where a lot of the direction of what we talked about was. And then, one of the things we were debating was, what would that standard number be? Are we going to go with the 58 or, in all circumstances, et cetera? So I don't know if we maybe had a more in-depth conversation about a couple of those key features.
Yeah, and I'll jump to our group actually, because I think that is going to be needed, because we had a conversation around 58 as the number as well, but also that, in some circumstances that may not be the right number, and we also talked a lot about relying more upon, borings of the soil that's actually on site versus the soil surveys kind of giving just kind of a rough idea of what is there. But, looking at 58 is that's the goal, but for lack of a better term, also a recognition of the reality of what's on that site and seeing what can we get to. There was a mention that it's a really good number to use for a large project, but it can be quite challenging with dealing with kind of a redevelopment site. Did I get that correctly? Paul.
So that's pretty much good on what you just said. The same thing as well.
Okay. I'll go diagonally.
You want me to go first? And jump in if I didn't capture everything because I was out at the beginning and was in for a little bit towards the end. We had a lot of discussion about just the balances of, what does that mean? We do have impacts from rural areas as that water comes in from outside. What are we doing about that? Can we make a difference with that or not? The concerns about affordability of, if we meet a certain standard, does it make it more difficult to make housing affordable? And then there was some discussion about regional versus on-site. Would it be better to try to accomplish these goals with regional basins versus, everybody, each development doing kind of their own thing? But then there was also the discussion about like the process of stream degradation in the smaller streams, like especially even the ones that are just smaller watershed acres. They may not have water come in from outside that we see issues with. Josh, what else did you cover?
That covers most of it. Another broader topic is just the straight 5-year release rate, because if we're truly trying to mimic hydrology to a meadow condition, just going back to a strict 5-year release rate doesn't do that, because you're just prolonging the release rate of a larger volume. So that could be somewhat like a give and take, where we get the CN of 58, but yet we don't have to always have this 5-year release rate.
So how you balance against competing with different.
That's our next, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of.
But I do want to jump in, so because the thing you said, Greg, about looking at regional retention and things like that. I think that the Prairie Trail actually is kind of an example of that. Even though that came in under one developer, cities can think of that in their watershed regions where certain areas might be taking different aspects of stormwater management, so that the watershed as a whole is accomplishing what's desired, but on individual sites, it may have its contributing piece to that. That's kind of something we need to figure out. The non-engineering table.
Yeah, no engineers over here, but we figure about the same thing. We figure if this whole effort is to restore ecosystem services, then that pre-development isn't necessarily enough. In the city of Windsor Heights, they have pre-development with natural or something attached to it, so it's not just whatever parking lot was there before and things like that. So we would be more for the meadow, the very pre, before they came and messed things up condition.
Yeah. Are there any comments from any of the tables that were missed?
I guess I'm curious, so I wasn't here last time. Have we talked about redevelopment to some extent, or that's kind of, maybe?
I just want to make one little comment on the, it sounds like everyone's in agreement on meadow in good condition. So just a little comment on soil conditions. If you just went existing undeveloped, which would be agriculture, that variability is very dramatic. So, this farmer might use cover crops or this farmer might use no-till. And so that is just, there's such a wide spread on that. Just a little side comment.
I would also say that I don't think it was fully unanimous that everyone agreed that that Meadow 58 was the proper place to revert back to. So.
Question on that, because I mean, one of the things that our group that we kind of had going was, whether Meadow 58 would be the goal, but again, reacting to this, what's on the site, to kind of figure out, well, how close can we get, those kinds of things. Is that what we'll be talking about?
And is that a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I think from a development community standpoint, that's probably the only practical way to look at it. If you're talking about doing borings and things, I mean, everything can be done, but how do we do that? We're already not producing enough housing, and the housing we're producing is not at an affordable rate. So that's right. I brought up the regional piece. Probably makes more sense having the community look at it from a bigger picture, and then those individual developments funneling into that or buying into that development, that water management process, rather than trying to have individual pods. And we've already kind of went through a few years ago about the kind of the impracticality of trying to capture all that water on site and in every individual lot, just based on all those same dynamics that we just talked about. So if we're trying to look at big picture, I think we have to take all those components into play. We can't just say, in an ideal world, we can say in an ideal world, we'd like to get it back to the condition it was, but in the real world, I don't think that's probably the right conversation we have, because I don't think that's going to get us to where we're going to find a result that we all agree with or we can live with.
Greg, I think you were going to say something too.
Well, I was just going to say some of that might loop into the next discussion too. I mean, because you're talking about the largest storms, so some of that further discussion on what, if you are talking natural, what curve number or whatever, you select could apply to your next discussion.
Versus what might be done on an individual site regarding smaller storms.
Because Jennifer came over and asked me if we were talking about that with this discussion, and we hadn't really framed it that way when we started. So I'm just going to say that could bleed over to our next discussion too.
Well, I know Kyle wanted to jump up, so
Oh, I already jumped in.
go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to see that Josh didn't have a presentation since Rachel did. But the question was framed on what Josh just said, and okay, if we're trying to mimic what used to be here, are we going to detain for meadow condition and just match that from the smaller storms all the way up to the bigger storms? And are we going to detain, say, the 100-year developed down to the 100-year meadow, or do we still want to detain, the 100-year developed down to the 5-year? Well, I framed this to my group. We started discussing in topic 3 as well. It depends on our goal. If we're trying to go above and beyond what we are now, make it better, and we're trying to get into a situation where, we all have reviewed or been in a situation where we don't catch something in a review, or something gets manipulated a little bit, we can't catch everything, and they end up detaining a little bit less than they probably should. Well, in this situation, well, we're already getting way past where we are now, so we're still in a better situation. However, if we're going to say, and I'll frame this as the 100-year meadow is usually higher than a 5-year existing condition, or even obviously a 5-year meadow, depending on obviously soil types and stuff like that. So the 100-year meadow would be a less restrictive standard if you don't take into account that we're going to obviously drastically lower the curve numbers. So if our goal is to detain as much as possible and also get into a situation where we won't solve existing problems, but we will lessen existing problems, then yeah, still detain to the 5-year rate, because now we're still over detaining. But if we're trying to match a natural condition the way it used to be, and match a meadow condition all the way from the large storm event down, then we're still going to be better off than what we are now. And like Josh said, if we're detaining a bunch and it's just going to be an extended release over the next day, well, we've all seen streams starting to downcut, and it gets deeper and deeper and then wider and wider in our communities. So if we want to lessen that, well, we can get into a debate on whether or not, you know, we detain less and it's a shorter peak and all that, on whether or not the stream would still erode. I'm here to say that the stream's still going to erode, but if we're managing the water quality volume and the channel protection volume, from my perspective, the really large stuff, whether we're talking about the 100-year meadow or the 5-year existing, I'm not here to say that Polk County has a preference for either one, but I would say that it depends on the goal that we're trying to meet. If we're just trying to detain as much as possible and be good stewards and match natural condition, okay, let's detain to the 100-year meadow condition. Well, if we're trying to detain even more than that and maybe lessen existing erosion or existing flooding problems downstream of this development that we're all having, and now the already developed portions of our communities, well, then we should go even farther than that and still have the 5-year standard, from the 100-year down to the 5-year existing. But then we get into a situation where there's multiple layers that now the developer and or the engineer has to go through to reach what they actually have to detain to, when I would rather be more simplistic and we decide on a standard rather than have an either or. This is the standard and you have to follow it. Not, well, calculate this and then you calculate this and then you have to take the lesser or the more or whatever. It's just we should adopt whatever our goal is now and have it be simplistic throughout from start to finish. But that's just me.
I think you framed it. So we'll go to our groups.